something is happening to the wise ones, the peaceful ones, the truth seekers among us. They're vanishing, not in dramatic exits or grand departures, but in quiet retreats from a world that no longer recognizes their value. If you felt yourself pulling away from society, becoming invisible to the noise around you, this might be the most important message you'll hear today. There's an old story about a monk who lived in a monastery high in the mountains. For years, people would climb the treacherous path to seek his wisdom. But as the world below became louder and more chaotic, fewer and fewer visitors came. One day, a young seeker finally made the journey and asked the monk, "Master, why do you no longer come down to teach in the villages?" The monk smiled softly and replied, "I never left. The world simply stopped listening." This ancient tale reflects exactly what's happening now. The spiritually awake, the deeply connected, the naturally wise aren't abandoning their purpose. They're responding to a world that has closed its ears to truth and opened its arms to noise. When Gandhi said, "In a gentle way, you can shake the world," he understood something we've forgotten. True power doesn't need to shout to be heard. But today, gentle wisdom is drowned out by the loudest voice in the room. The first reason spiritual people are stepping back is heartbreaking in its simplicity. Truth has lost its seat at the table. We live in an age where being right matters less than being loud, where wisdom is valued less than wit, where depth is sacrificed for speed. The spiritual person speaks from experience, from inner knowing, from that quiet place where real understanding lives. But these days, that quiet voice gets lost in the chaos. Think about the last time you tried to have a deep conversation at a party. The moment you moved beyond surface talk, you probably noticed eyes glazing over, people reaching for their phones, the conversation shifting back to something lighter, something easier. This is what spiritual people face every day. They carry pearls of wisdom, but the world is too busy collecting plastic beads. There's a reason the Buddha spent years in meditation before he spoke a single word of teaching. He understood that truth needs time to ripen, silence to grow, and stillness to be born. But modern society runs on instant everything, instant opinions, instant reactions, instant judgments. There's no space for the slow, careful wisdom that comes from within. When spiritual people realize their voice isn't being heard, not because it's wrong, but because it's too calm, too measured, too real, they make a choice. They stop trying to convince anyone. They retreat. Not because they're weak, but because they understand something most people don't. You can't water a garden during a hurricane. You wait for the storm to pass. The ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "The sage does not attempt anything very big, and thus achieves greatness." Spiritual people understand this. They're not trying to change the world through force or noise. They're trying to change it through presence, through being, through the subtle influence of a life lived in alignment with truth. But when the world values performance over presence, these quiet influences become invisible. The second reason runs even deeper. The energy of our world has become toxic to sensitive souls. Imagine trying to sleep in a room where every light is blazing, every speaker is blaring, every screen is flashing. That's how most spiritual people feel just walking through their daily lives. Everything is vibrating too fast, too loud, too chaotic. There's a story about a master musician who was invited to perform at a grand concert hall. But when he arrived, he found the hall filled with a dozen different orchestras, all playing different songs at maximum volume. The musician stood there for a moment, listening to the chaos, then quietly packed up his instrument and left. When asked why, he said, "I came to create music, not to add to the noise." This is what's happening to spiritual people. Their nervous systems, finely tuned to subtlety and nuance, can't handle the constant bombardment of stimulation. Social media feeds that never stop scrolling, news cycles that never stop spinning, conversations that never stop surface-level chattering. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a thunderstorm. The human nervous system wasn't designed for this level of constant stimulation. 100 years ago, the most exciting thing that might happen in a person's day was a letter from a distant relative. Now we're bombarded with information, opinions, and stimulation from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. And for those whose souls are naturally attuned to peace and stillness, this constant assault becomes unbearable. They're not running away from life. They're running towards sanity. They're choosing silence, not as escape, but as survival. Because they understand something the noisy world has forgotten. In stillness, wisdom grows. In silence, truth emerges. In peace, the soul remembers what it came here to do. The third reason is perhaps the most telling of our times. Spiritual people are disappearing because they refuse to fake it. In a world obsessed with image, where people perform happiness for likes, where spirituality itself has become a brand to be marketed, the real ones simply can't participate in the charade. There's a powerful story about a Sufi master who was known for his radiant joy. But one day, a student found him weeping. Confused, the student asked, "Master, why do you cry when you teach us that joy is our natural state?" The master looked up with tears in his eyes and said, "I cry because I see so many people pretending to be happy when their souls are breaking. True joy can only emerge from authentic feeling, not from performance." This captures the dilemma perfectly. Spiritual people feel deeply. They can't pretend to be happy when their soul feels heavy. They can't fake positivity when what the world needs is truth, not performance. They can't smile for the camera when their heart is breaking for humanity's disconnection from itself. Social media has turned spirituality into a performance. People post quotes they don't live by, share wisdom they don't embody, and create content that looks spiritual but lacks soul. The real spiritual people watch this theater and feel nauseated. They'd rather be honest in solitude than fake in the spotlight. The pressure to constantly appear spiritual is exhausting. To always be positive, always be grateful, always be light and love. But true spirituality includes the full spectrum of human experience. It includes anger at injustice, grief for the world's pain, frustration with humanity's choices. When spirituality becomes about maintaining an image rather than living authentically, the authentic ones opt out. The fourth reason strikes at the heart of the spiritual person's experience. They're tired of always giving and rarely receiving. If you've ever been the one everyone comes to for comfort, advice, or peace, you know this exhaustion intimately. It's not that they don't want to help. It's that they've realized their energy is sacred and it's not meant for everyone. There's an old parable about a well that never ran dry. People came from far and wide to drink from its waters. But one day, the well began to run low. The wise keeper of the well didn't panic. Instead, he built a gate and only allowed those who truly needed water to drink. When people complained, he said, "The well's gift is not unlimited. To serve everyone carelessly is to serve no one truly." Spiritual people learn this lesson the hard way. They give and give until they're empty. They pour their light into others until their own lamp dims. They offer their wisdom until their own well runs dry. And then they realize something crucial. Their energy is not a renewable resource that can be spent without consequence. It's a sacred gift that must be protected and shared wisely. The awakened ones discover that people want their light, but not their struggle. They want their wisdom, but not their boundaries. They want their peace, but not their process. People are happy to take from the spiritual person's well, but few think to ask what feeds the well itself. This isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation. It's the recognition that to be truly helpful, you must first be truly whole. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't give what you don't have. So they retreat, not because they don't care, but because they finally understand that caring for themselves is the first step in caring for others. The fifth reason reveals a profound shift in understanding. Spiritual people are disappearing because they've realized that true change doesn't always happen in public. Sometimes the most important healing happens quietly, in private, behind closed doors. Not everything sacred needs an audience. Mother Teresa spent most of her life working in the slums of Calcutta, away from cameras and crowds. When asked why she didn't seek more publicity for her work, she said, "We cannot all do great things, but we can do small things with great love." She understood that presence is more powerful than performance, that one moment of real connection can shift more than 100 speeches. The spiritual ones have learned this lesson. They've discovered that you don't need to be loud to be impactful. Sometimes the most profound healing happens in a quiet conversation between two people. Sometimes the most important teaching happens in the way you live your life, not in the words you speak. They've shifted from noise to essence, from trying to reach millions to touching one, from building platforms to building presence. This isn't retreat, it's refinement. It's the understanding that true spiritual work happens in the invisible realm, in the space between thoughts, in the pause between breaths, in the love that flows silently between souls. The sixth and deepest reason is the most painful of all. Spiritual people are disappearing because the world they're being asked to live in no longer matches the world their soul remembers. This isn't about nostalgia or romanticism. It's about a deep soul knowing that something fundamental has been lost. Many spiritual people carry what can only be described as soul memories. Memories not of this lifetime, but of a time when humanity lived closer to nature, to spirit, to truth. They remember a time when communities were built on connection rather than competition, when wisdom was valued over wealth, when the pace of life allowed for depth and contemplation. There's a beautiful story from the indigenous traditions about the star people, souls who remember their cosmic origin and feel like strangers on earth. These beings walk among us, carrying the memory of a more peaceful existence, feeling homesick for a home they can't quite name. This is what many spiritual people feel today. The modern world, with its emphasis on speed, consumption, and surface-level connection, feels alien to these souls. The constant striving, the artificial nature of relationships, the disconnection from nature and natural rhythms, it all feels wrong. They don't feel at home here, and slowly, piece by piece, they step back. This isn't bitterness, it's grief. They're mourning a world their heart remembers, but their eyes can no longer see. They're grieving for humanity's loss of connection to itself, to the earth, to the sacred. And sometimes, grief requires solitude. But here's what's beautiful about this disappearing. It's not an ending, it's a beginning. When you feel yourself pulling away from society, becoming invisible to the noise around you, you're not dying, you're being reborn. You're awakening to a deeper truth, a deeper calling, a deeper way of being. The spiritual person's retreat is not escape, it's return. Return to the soul, return to truth, return to what really matters. In a world that has lost its way, sometimes the most radical act is to remember who you really are. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in the madness. There's an ancient concept called the dark night of the soul. It's not about depression or despair. It's about the soul's journey inward, away from the external world, to find its true source of light. This is what's happening to the spiritual ones. They're not disappearing, they're diving deeper. And here's what the world doesn't understand. Just because they vanish doesn't mean they're gone. They're still here, watching, feeling, healing, holding space. Sometimes in nature, sometimes in meditation, sometimes in silence. They are anchoring something invisible but incredibly real. They are holding the frequency of peace in a chaotic world, like lighthouses that seem to stand alone but guide ships safely to shore. The spiritual ones who have retreated are still serving. They're just serving from a different place, a deeper place, a place where their light can shine without being dimmed by the world's noise. If you're one of these vanishing ones, know this: you're not alone. There are others like you, quietly living in alignment, refusing to compromise their soul. You may not see them on the news or in your social media feed, but they're there. They're the ones who choose truth over popularity, presence over performance, depth over surface. You're not wrong for feeling disconnected. You're not lazy for needing more silence. You're not antisocial for preferring solitude to superficial social interaction. You're awakening. You're aligning. And this silence, this space, this invisibility, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something deeper. When society no longer supports the soul doesn't fight. It simply steps aside. And that's what you've been feeling. A quiet inner knowing that says this world no longer reflects who you truly are. But just because you're stepping away from society doesn't mean you're stepping away from life. In fact, many spiritual people find that after disappearing, they start to really live for the first time. They find real peace, not in the noise, but in the stillness. They find real connection, not in the crowd, but in the silence. They find real joy, not in the performance, but in the presence. They discover that the things they thought they needed, approval, attention, applause, were just distractions from what they truly sought. And here's the most powerful part of all this. The world will come looking for the spiritual ones again. When the chaos gets too loud, when the systems start to collapse, when people start realizing that outer success means nothing without inner peace, that's when they'll seek out the ones who disappeared. The ones who refused to sell their soul, the ones who chose truth over popularity, the ones who maintained their connection to something real when everything else felt fake. And when that time comes, you'll be ready. You won't have to force anything. You'll just be, and your presence will do what your words never could. Your peace will be a balm to the wounded world. Your truth will be a lighthouse in the darkness. Your love will be a reminder of what humanity is capable of when it remembers its true nature. So if you're one of the vanishing ones, keep going, keep protecting your peace, keep honoring your intuition, keep choosing depth over surface, truth over performance, presence over noise. The world may not understand you right now, but one day they will. And when they do, you'll be there, not because you had to come back, but because you chose to. Not because you needed to prove anything, but because you had something real to offer. You're not disappearing. You're remembering. You're not vanishing. You're returning to who you've always been, beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the pressure to be anything other than your authentic self. And that remembering, that return, that authentic being, that is the most powerful thing you could ever do. In a world that has forgotten its soul, you are the ones who remember. In a world that has lost its way, You are the ones who hold the map. In a world that has dimmed its light, you are the ones who keep the flame alive. Your disappearance is not defeat, it's preparation. You are the ones the world has been waiting for, even if it doesn't know it yet.